got 30 people on a lineup, but because they've been there twice in the last 2 years, they say that's too often.
Yeah, and also the price of the talent. I mean, there's probably some promoters that are sitting here just like me, and it's been hard to juggle a quality lineup, keep it at a competitive price, and be able to afford the lineup, because with competition comes an increase in prices. Like, you know, there's some acts that we used to get. Say we used to get an act for $100,000 for 5 shows, and within 2 or 3 years the price has gone up to $500,000 because there's 5 other festivals competing for the price. So competing for that act. So it's really hard to juggle a lineup and make it fit. We have this thing, you know, we talk in footy terms because we like football. It's like a salary cap where we've got X amount of dollars to spend, and we have to try and get the best lineup that we can, because we feel that's the maximum we can spend, because the maximum ticket price we can charge is X amount of dollars, where it gets too expensive for the punter. So it's tough. And the lineup, as you said, Grant, it's the kids are getting more savvy, and if they don't want to see the same sort of acts every time. Like I notice with a lot of festivals, like in America, like Ultra and Creamfields in the UK and these sorts of things, you look at the lineup of Creamfields this year and you look at the lineup of Creamfields in the UK last year, and 80% of that lineup probably played last year. There's probably 20% as new acts or acts that didn't play Creamfields last year. In Australia, there's so much competition. If you have 80% of the lineup this year that played last year, all the kids on the forums complain and say, oh, it's the same old shit as last year, we're not going to go. So it's you know, it's tough.
Hey, Richie, can I interrupt there? Why, if it's like that now, and the fact that, you know, there's like been a situation where you guys have like whittled out the festivals who haven't succeeded or haven't continued, don't you think it would be more beneficial for you guys to like communicate better, so that you didn't spend, you know, more money than you should have, and actually work together, so that at the end of the day you guys are benefiting rather than the agents and the artists?
Should I answer that question?
Go ahead.
The obvious answer is yeah, we should definitely be communicating. And, you know, I guess the word's called collusion in some respects. You know, and there are companies that do it around the world. I think Apple and all the publishers of iBooks are in that courts in America about that same thing at the moment with the prices for books. I mean, you could, but I think at the same time with competition and the way it is with a lot of promoters and festivals, like the reason, you know, I work with the Onelove guys is we have a similar mindset, and we have similar philosophies and values in what we do. And I think there are some promoters in Australia, and it's the same around the world, that have different philosophies on how they want to do things. And sometimes it's just hard to bring everybody together. Although you're working for the same common cause, it is difficult to get everyone in the same room, you know, to work together on those sorts of things, because it's just the nature of any business where it's competitive, and someone's had a falling out with this guy and used to work with him 10 years ago and now he's over here, and this person used to work with this guy 5 years ago and now he's over here, and they hate each other because he slept with his girlfriend or whatever else. And it's hard to get everyone, it's really hard to get everyone to work together. And as a promoter in Australia, we set up a body 6 or 7 years ago. In Australia, we're a very over-regulated country, with police and first, you know, the ambulance, and with the authorities and the government. It's incredibly difficult to get venues, and there have been certain political policies that have been made by the government that we haven't agreed with, and we've tried to set up a market body, you know, like a dance music, electronic music sort of festival event community body in the past to sort of combat and speak to the government as a collective.
I might open that up to the floor then. What does everyone else think? Do we think that we need a body that Richie's talking about?
I think so. I think Australia pays more money for acts than any country in the world, and I think it's their own fault.
Why is that?
I think, to be honest, there's a lot of egos involved, a lot of competition, and yeah, there's only a certain amount of acts out there that are going to bring the numbers. And you know, when you're looking at, starts off like Richie said, 5 years ago pay $100,000, and now they're paying $1 million for 5 shows, whereas, you know, the same DJ is getting, you know, $2,000 in Italy, he's getting $500,000 in Australia, because yeah, it's just the way it is.
And it all just forces that ticket price up and affects the festival, so they get a lesser show, which is a shame.
Well, the unintended spin-off of that too is that the clubs are in a lot of strife. We get 6 weeks on either, well, it's in a block 3 weeks or 3 weeks afterwards, where everyone's spent their money going to a festival, and we all talk about festival pricing and paying too much, but you can't even think about touring decent club DJs through venues anymore, because the expectation is, especially with America coming online, to offer someone at $2,000 or $3,000 a show plus flights when they can get 20,000 in America to play the same show, they're not going to come. It's the end of story. So it's not even a negotiation. So while we might sit here and say we want to pay what we pay, they're getting paid what they get paid. So if we don't offer them $1 million for a festival, they might get that on New Year's Eve for one show. So I think that's the other thing to understand. It's dance music's become more popular. The artists have become more popular. Kaz would like to write another Body Rockers and charge $1 million a show, and I can tell you he would, as much as he'd sit there and says he wouldn't charge you less.
I would charge $1 million.
You would charge.
100%.
Of course you would. So
it's not about me, we're talking about why it is what it is.
Yeah, but I think the club as the unintended victim, and unfortunately that's where our roots lie, and trying to get a venue proposition where I think festival attracts people who like the show and they like the visual aspect and they might like an artist, but are they actually week-to-week punters? Probably not all of them are, and I think that's the unintended consequence of having a saturated market. It's very difficult to get buy-in. I don't know what you guys think, but that's...
A question then for John and Grant. Do you think it's possible to have a successful and thriving festival scene and a successful and thriving club scene at the same time?
I actually think so, yeah. I mean, it's kind of... I mean, we do work with Stereo, but at the same time, we specialize in club tours. And I think the thing for us is, if we can get the right artist at the right time, like for example, you know, we did Hardwell in November when he wasn't doing anything else in the US. We got him at good fees, and we got 6 shows over 2 weekends, and every single show was excellent. And I think it's just it's about timing, it's about price, and it's just trying to figure out when you can do the tours. But I actually firmly believe that you can do great festivals and club tours. But in saying that, some festivals are going to drop off. You know, Stereosonic is probably the main powerhouse at the moment in Australia. It's going to continue to be bigger and better. But you know, myself and Grant, we both run companies that do touring, and some tours work, some don't. But I mean, we just have to keep trying and pushing as hard as we can. And I think clubs are coming back because venues realize that they have to spend more money to get these artists. So I think it's going to get better in general. What do you think, Grant?
Bro, is that not just with the festivals, but the lack of venues and the lack of support from venue owners and the government to allow people to actually put on successful events in a club environment. That's having as much of a negative effect as, well, actually, in fact, more of a negative effect than the festivals have.
And why do you think there's a lack of venues?
Well, just because there aren't enough venues. No, more so than that. Like seriously, like obviously, there's a lack of venues, but more so, even the venues that are there, they are overly regulated and they have ridiculous rules and ridiculous situations that people don't feel comfortable with, like investing their time, their effort, and their money in, you know, putting together a show that they're proud of or they're comfortable with, because at the end of the day, they don't have the support from the venues. Or like on a whole, you know, there obviously are a few venues, but if you compare them to Europe or not the US, but Europe, maybe like one venue in Sydney has semi-decent abilities. You know,
there's been a real lack of creativity in the club scene. I mean, from my perspective, that there hasn't been any real new clubs in Australia in the last 10 years, anything decent. There's been a couple where you go to Europe and you know, America and various, you know, in Japan and these sorts of places, or China, there's a new nightclub opening every week. Sure, they only last for a year or 6 months, some of them, or 18 months until they build apartments.
Well, the problem is the people who actually run the venues are like bar owners or venue owners. They don't actually understand that people want to develop the venue, you know, towards a certain way. They just like think, okay, guys, come in, put an event on, how much money am I going to make? They don't like think about a strategy or a future with it.
It's true.
I think over the last 6 months, they were starting to see a turn. I mean, I think also the fact that when I used to run Sublime, it used to be 2,500 people every single week, and I know when the big festivals really started to impact, and a lot of the venues started trying to almost parody festival-style lineups, and you had the DJ promoter and the effect that had of having not fabulous programming, not fabulous music. And I feel just over the last year and even over the last 6 months, the lineups are stronger, it's more music-led, it's less kind of pay-to-play crap, and it's definitely seeing a turn in Sydney for sure.
Yeah, the lineups are stronger, but seriously, the venues are like tired. There's not even one There's not even one venue that you can say is a decent, quality venue in Sydney.
Quite liking Hi-Fi right now.
Good plug.
It's not a club though, it's a band venue, but you're right. It's one new venue.
Okay, moving on to the next topic. The Live Nation's purchase of Creamfields was obviously one of the industry's worst kept secrets for a while. We're hearing lots of rumours that Live Nation's looking at the Australian market next. Richie, are they?
I mean, there's a lot of people looking at the Australian market. I think no, there is. I mean, there's been a lot of promoters. ID&T have come in and run shows there, and Global Gathering have come in and run shows there, and V Festival came in up until a couple of years ago. There's been a lot of people for a long time looking at the Australian market. I mean, Live Nation are definitely looking to invest. They just bought the biggest promoter in Australia, Michael Koppel, who tours Metallica, sells 350,000 tickets to Metallica, and it's got Lady Gaga coming up, Pink, all that sort of stuff. I mean, they just purchased him. Look, I mean, there's AEG, there's Live Nation, there's SFX, there's lots of interest in the Australian market. But I think it's not just Australia. I think it's as the first panel discussion or whatever it was, the presentation yesterday at 1 o'clock, is dance music has exploded everywhere across the planet. And there's people looking to invest in electronic music from an events perspective, in Europe, in the States, in Asia, as well. So it's not just Australia, but yeah, I mean, we're talking to people, and I know people are talking to other promoters in Australia, and the Michael Koppel purchase was in January, and the James Barton one was just a month ago, and there's a very famous festival in Japan called Stereosonic, which is run by a promoter called Creative Man, who I've seen their products and I love what they do. I've been to the festival as well. They've just been bought by Live Nation. It's just, I think it's just a natural progression.
And how would such a purchase change the Australian festival market?
Look, I don't think it'll change that much. I mean, as James said, James Barton, who I've worked with known for 20 years, is basically James Barton is James Barton. I don't think he's going to change. If anyone that knows him well, his personality and the sort of guy he is, I don't think someone buying your company, whether you've got a shoe company or whether you're the record label, or whether you're a dance promoter or a rock promoter, or whether you own a pizza shop, I don't think if someone buys your business and keeps you in the business, I don't think things have to change. I think it's how the deal's structured when someone talks to you, and I think it just depends on why people are selling the business. If some people are selling just for the money, they might not give a shit and whatever, and then there's some people that, like myself, I've worked in this business, I've built my business up for 20 odd years, so I certainly wouldn't be giving the keys to someone. They can give me some money, but I certainly wouldn't be giving the keys to them and losing control. I certainly wouldn't want to be in that situation. I think most people anywhere in the world that have worked hard for many years in developing something that's their own business won't want to give it up for anything so much. So I don't think it'll change that much, to be honest.
But I think in the last 2 or 3 years, V Festival, We Love Sounds, a few others who have gone down. I think Australia right now is at an optimal festival level. I think if anyone came in, whether it's a new festival or they have however much money they have and however big their lineup is, if anyone comes in, someone's going to lose out from it because it's so overloaded already. But everyone's timing is, strategically put toward over the summer, and I think if someone tries to fit into that,
what we don't need is a new festival.
Yeah,
I agree.
Go elsewhere.
Everybody agrees. There's enough. Too many. That's why we're here.
Okay, changing topics once again. The Australia being a population of 20 million people means that quite often it's used as a test market for companies to kind of test out things before they roll them out throughout the world. One such example is She Can DJ, which is a project that Bev Malcolm worked on. Bev, do you just want to quickly give us a summary of what that project is and how it was first started?
Yeah, I mean, Australia wasn't really a test market for it. It is an Australian concept it's an A&R source project to source from the top 100 professional female DJs and to sign one. We launched it last year. We actually signed 2. We got a bit greedy. Minx and Alice in Wonderland, and it was just really embraced by the industry ambassadors from, Jane Slingo, Grant, Danny Young, who looks after Miami Horror, through to international ambassadors like Sarah Main from Pasha, Jason Ellis, Bart Cools from EMI, and the reaction was so strong that actually now, and the success was more than what we expected. So now it's rolling out globally. So it's already live in Italy. The ones I can talk about are France, Germany, and Holland, and there's a few other territories that are about to roll out. And the winner signs to a global EMI deal. And Minx, who's our inaugural winner, you'll see later on tonight at Dol Villa. So yeah, it wasn't really a test site for it, but I suppose it ended up being the pilot for what's going to happen around the globe.
How do they decide who wins?
Well, it's an extended, the whole first section of the project is like a traditional A&R scouting. It's a tap on the shoulder through the ambassadors, and then we're out and about and interviewing the top 75 about what they are as an artist. It's about what their album would be, and then we bring the top 10 together, and then the whole thing turns on its head, and they have their radio, they have studio sessions with our VP of A&R, Scott Horscroft, who also produces Empire of the Sun and some other big Australian acts.
Which brings us to an interesting question, which is Australian artists trying to crack overseas, which this is an obvious example of. Kaz, do you think that an Australian artist needs to make it big overseas in order to be taken seriously in Australia?
No. No, I think there's a lot of DJs that do really well in Australia and no one knows them over here. So I don't think it makes a difference. But I think before, I broke it over here, I was quite known in Australia. That's where I came from and grew up the ranks, Onelove in the club and stuff. So I think, coming over here was sort of just a next step. But I'm really intrigued about the your TV show.
You can DJ, don't you?
No, I just don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into it.
It's not a reality show. It's a
Go
fly
on,
on the
say
wall
it.
documentary. Don't worry.
Say it, Kaz. What's up?
What is happening to DJing? That's what I want to say. It's like I know. I think the concept's brilliant, and I think it's great. But when I watch shows
all
like
in the same house.
Yeah, when I watch Simon Cowell's all his shows, I've just got no connection with any of those artists. You know what I mean? For me, they're like karaoke singers.
I totally agree with you, but we're not writing their songs. We're not asking, there were girls in that top 100. Some of them were, all of the girls in the top 100 were professional DJs, and some of them you speak to them and they're like, well, what do you want me to be? It's like, this isn't Idol. This isn't Next Top Model. This is, who are you? Can EMI get behind it and actually turn it into a global reality? Not the other way around. It's not. And I think a lot of people sat back and waited to see if that's what it was. And then there's people now, the testimonials, and there's stuff coming back from...
I haven't seen the show, so I'm just...
It hasn't been made yet, don't worry.
Okay.
We're going to do He Can DJ after that.
Okay, moving on to the...
Maybe, you never know.
Moving on to the next topic. Matt, we might throw it down to you down the end. As an Australian record label, what's your take on the health of the Australian record buying?
In the record buying market?
In dance music.
In dance music, I mean, it's still at the moment when it comes to album sales as such, unless it's like a David Guetta with pop radio capabilities, you're not going to have a platinum record. And then it's about compilations, similar to what the UK market was like, where it's the compilations lead the sales for album sales. But you can still get singles away, and there's a lot of active people. It's just working out how to monetize things, because there's a whole generation coming through now that have grown up not with the culture of buying records like we may have when we were younger. So it's working out how to engage them online, whether with Spotify launching now. Opportunities with sync deals and just working your catalogue. You just have to work a lot harder, but there's still plenty of, it's still a strong market.
On our label, we're lucky enough to have Skrillex, Knife Party, those kind of caliber acts, as well as some more pop and sort of underground artists. We're lucky with Triple J to go platinum on Skrill's album and triple platinum on Scary Monsters. That was with not much support, but then equally he drives that himself through his own fan base. I'm not going to try and take credit for that guy, because I didn't even service it to radio. They discovered it on their own and built their own profile. But I find that it's difficult with the amount of records. I'm sure anyone in this room would get up to 200 promos a week if you're DJing or if you've got a label. So cutting through the crap is the hardest part, because there's just so much going to radio. So the difficulty I find is that with America now becoming pop oriented with a dance 4/4, every record sounds the same. So getting that artist engagement and getting the cut through is now the hard part. The record sales, be it with Knife Party, they did 500,000 downloads for free on their last EP, but we still managed to sell 30-odd thousand copies. So you're still getting some cut through, but I guess it's people don't necessarily know where to go to the blogs or find it. I guess that's when mainstream starts to kick in. But certainly we're having to find new ways to get revenue, because if you're reliant upon, in the old days we'd sit there and press wax. Now we're sounding really old, but you'd leave it at radio for a long time, leave it at clubs, then go to radio 7-8 weeks later, sometimes more. You might as well commit commercial suicide if you do that now. The day you play it on radio, if it gets a Pete Tong play, for example, you should be on sale, because if you're not, you're losing revenue. So it's a different ballgame, that's for sure.
One thing that Grant said before, when you were talking about the pop dance music and everything sounding the same, that is definitely the case. It makes it a little bit harder when it comes to commercial radio now as well too in Australia, because the music directors at the commercial radio stations that would add traditional dance music, maybe one track a month to keep the quota of the genre going. You're now competing with Usher, Chris Brown, and artists like that as well too. So when you take a track to radio, they're like, oh, we've already added 2 dance tracks, when they really added 2 pop tracks.
Well, honestly, Matt, I think that's a very important thing, bro. Like, the radio situation in Australia is embarrassing.
It is.
It's like it's so 100%
that's the whole other
obvious
subject, isn't it,
and
Wade?
ridiculous. It's like, it's boring. You don't even want to hear it, man.
No.
Do you think that's going to change? Do you think someone's going to step up and offer a more unique, more individual option? I mean, FBI, try hard, but it's not really, it's a bit.
What was that, Jane?
Radio is all about selling ads. It's not about playing music. And
in Australia, but
in Australia, that's right. And that you've got Triple J, which has got their market, and the major networks like Nova and Oz Stereo that have their market. I can't see them shifting their format dramatically, because they need to play.
But do you think they're going to offer more licenses to people to allow them to offer a different service?
They have a stranglehold on those companies have a stranglehold on the major licenses. But with digital radio coming, and people getting creative, especially with streaming apps on phones. Some of the radio stations that are dance orientated, that might be community based in a particular city, that had a low reach, are now getting people in different states, playing the streaming app in their car, from smartphones, etc. So it can change a little bit, but the major networks, they're not going to start changing their formats.
Let's kill them.
There's no way they'll change their formats. They spend $300 million on their license, so there's no chance they'll defend that till they die. So
let's kill them then.
The only thing that you can do is with internet, and I agree, right? If with the internet and the ability to app and stream, you can certainly go harder that way. But the commercial reality is, and even with festivals these days, we're getting pop artists to appeal to the masses. So it's a changing a game, and next year I'm sure we'll see even more pop crossover people at festivals, because it's just becoming mainstream reality. They're accepting the same as they do artists now. Probably that means also we can go more underground, and hopefully an underground culture will come through to...
Well, the problem is, Matt, it's not happening quick enough. We're going to be sitting here for 2 years waiting for someone to wake up and make a difference. By that time, we're going to have missed the boat already.
It's happening though. It's definitely happening. There is an underground scene developing again.
Yeah, but there's no one taking.
Well, it's your job. You're the underground man in Australia.
So far this panel, we've found out
that.
But
internet, the thing is, mainstream people in their cars driving to work and stuff. They need to have an option instead of listening to some fucking muppets talking about nothing.
So far this panel, we found out that the clubs suck, radio sucks. What is good about?
Well, the thing is, they do, man. There's
Radio really sucks.
put it this way: there's room for improvement.
The weather's good.
What's good about the Australian scene?
The weather's good.
Great coffee.
Female DJs are great.
No, dude, we're lucky enough to be in a position to have amazing artists, amazing weather, amazing productions and festivals, and there's a good little underground scene happening now. But it could be so much more if people just made an effort to do the small things, and just support it more.
We need another 30 million people, and then we'll be okay.
Okay, so a question then to the non-Australians on the panel, Dev and Wade. what did you
I got a
guys...
What
passport
about
now,
John?
man,
And John as well. What did you...
John's Australian
What did you guys think about the Australian scene before you arrived, and how has that changed since you've been there?
I've been in Australia for 2.5 years now. I've had my business for 18 months, or just over 18 months. I didn't really know what I was getting myself in for, to be quite honest. It is probably the most competitive, cutthroat, it's just the toughest market to crack, especially if you're a foreigner. But I mean, look, I think it's a very interesting market. It's always changing. It's gone very commercial, unfortunately. Which doesn't. I mean, it's good for people like Richie. When he gets people like LMFAO and Stereosonic, that's always nice. But you look as a foreigner coming in, it's kind of. I mean, I think I've got a pretty good understanding of the market now, and I just basically, my job is to kind of develop young Australian artists into bigger artists, and hopefully they'll crack it overseas, because I think the Australian market's very limited. You look at someone like, Kaz or even Tommy Trash that have recently, Tommy Trash is a great example because he's been, working hard for the last 3 or 4 years, and then a year ago he decided that he needed to go overseas, and now he's earning ridiculous amounts of money in the US, and he's huge, and I think it's kind of sad if you think about it, because Australia is a fantastic country and for many different reasons, but for people like Tommy Trash to actually have to leave the country to be successful is kind of sad, and I think a lot of the things that we've discussed makes people like Tommy Trash want to leave, not being able to get records on the radio, things like that, so go on, Bev, I know you want to say something.
It's exciting, people like Tommy Trash smashing it now in America and stuff, that's great. I've been in Australia for 10 years. I know, to be honest, when I arrived, I knew very little about the market. And I had the opposite. I had, they had Basement Jackson, Roger Sanchez, Mobile Home, Can You Promote It? And that was an amazing opportunity. And I got to run Sublime for 6 years, which was dance music, absolutely killing it at its best every Friday. And that really surprised me, going over there and seeing it happening at that level. Over the past 10 years, it's obviously gone up and down, and it went through a real kind of bauble stage that I felt was a little bit more like Tokyo, where people were interested in things just for a very short amount of time. And now when you've got things like Stereosonic, and I think the fact that it works so closely with the club culture, and it grew out of satellite club events and still works with that, and then seeing some really great artists and events come through, I think it's a really exciting space to be in right now.
Wade?
Yeah, when I first got to Australia, it was pretty much like boring as, man. Like,
how long ago was that?
Terrible. Like 6 years ago, it was just like noise, man. And I started doing parties with like 12 on Strike, Ewan Pearson and Greg Wilson and stuff. And I think a lot of the people just came there because they were used to going to the place. They didn't even know who these guys were, but they started like getting into it, thankfully. And anyway, like the problem with it, we couldn't be consistent because no one actually knew what they were getting into. And then we started doing another night, and we moved from a weekly to a monthly, and we crossed over between one room being disco, one room being a bit of a bit more tech house at the like 5 years ago, and stuff like Geyser and Paul Rich and that, and which went very well. And now I tried to do a festival, lost loads of dough, totally screwed that up, and it was an expensive lesson to learn. But what it did do was allow me to own a certain space, which is to do sort of 1,000 to 3,000 person events. I look after Circle Loco, I look after all the Crosstown Rebels, Hot Nature, Hot Creations, all that stuff. And it's nice, it's easy, it's comfortable. I feel proud of it because I get the right people and they pay the right money and they come and have a good time. And it's an older crowd, so they don't come out every weekend, but when they do come out, things get out of hand, which is about time, because before that it was all very like regulated and stuff. Now it's boring as.
Thank you, Wade. Grant, I want to ask you this question. The question that has kind of come up a couple of times about Australian artists having to go overseas to make it, because you're an example of an Australian artist that has stayed in Australia predominantly and really made it successful. So why haven't you kind of packed your bags and moved overseas?
Yeah, good question. I guess the ability, I've got multiple hats that I wear, so it's kind of difficult to pack up shop and try and run an Aussie label overseas, for one, even though you can sort of do that equally, having a national radio show, got a Channel V property, a few other bits and pieces. So it's kind of, you're vested in a market, so I think sometimes it's good to play and allocate windows of time to come overseas. And that's worked best. There's work blocks for me to go to America, work blocks to go to Europe, work blocks to go to Asia, and blocks to stay in Australia. So at the end of the day, music has the ability to cut through. So I had a very strong record a few years ago, done some good stuff since, but I don't think I've made a record, being completely honest, that's probably would compel you to leave. The monetary value to staying in Australia hasn't tipped over to go international. So mine's been more financially based as a decision. However, and I wouldn't change that. I'd still change it, keep it in blocks. That's a lifestyle decision. I don't want to be 75 playing records.
Hey Grant, do you think that like the strength of the Australian dollar and the fact that more people are travelling and the younger people are going over to Europe and coming back, do you think that they're coming back with a more sort of open-minded attitude to clubbing and to what they expect from production and sound and the artists and the general experience?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's been a great time to travel, a really good time to travel. And if you've been here, if any Australians ever been here for the first time, they will come home and think it's boring.
Actually, I think in the last 12 months, the change in Sydney has been huge.
Yeah, I have to agree. I really would. And equally, if you think that in the old days we would have to have a studio, I still have got a very expensive studio. It's a wasted amount of money, considering you can do the same job on your laptop these days, and all the young guys are. So to sit there and think that it'd be naive to think that dance music hasn't evolved in the last few years, and now it is to the mainstream. But there's a young guy who's 14 who sent me a record yesterday. It's as good as anyone who's been in the industry for a very, very long time. And he made it on Fruity Loops and it took him 2 hours.
Settle.
So it's good, dude.
Yeah, great. Okay, I might. We've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to dedicate the next 5 minutes to finishing up, and then we'll have questions from the floor. I might do some panel questions now, so we'll start down the end with John, and everyone can kind of answer. John, where do you see the Australian festival landscape in 10 years' time? What do you think it's going to look like?
I don't know. That's a very tough question. I think there's going to be less festivals. I think the main players are going to remain. I think people like Stereosonic, Future Music Festival, and maybe just a few others will remain. I think a few have already dropped off. I think more are going to drop off. And I think, in general, the club scene is actually going to come back. And I actually think it's already coming back, but I think it's going to come back even stronger in the next, well, I was going to say kind of 2 years or so.
When they build real clubs.
Yeah, I think, there is some good clubs, but I think there needs to be more investment by venue owners to build better clubs.
Definitely.
But I think
I think they need to not only just build better clubs, but they need to open up the red tape to allow people to do events in spaces that are... Sydney's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Beautiful harbour. There's so many fucking open areas.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's too much regulation in Australia.
Too much regulation. It's getting tougher and tougher to do stuff in Australia. It's ridiculous how restricted it is.
Kill them.
Yeah.
Like with liquor licensing and getting permits from police and those sorts of things. We used to apply for our license for the Melbourne Festival, for example, right? It used to cost about $2,500 to $3,000 Australian dollars, so about $2,500 to $3,000 US to get our permit. It would be a 1 month process. Now it takes 6 months, costs us close to probably $30,000, and then we have to spend $100,000 on police, $30,000 on ambulances being there, and $10,000 to the bloody government and to the council to come through and inspect the place before we open. It is the most over-regulated, I think, country in the world to put on an event. However, in saying that, it being strict, some of the festivals where I see stages collapsing, that sort of stuff, that would never happen in Australia. We have the most stringent policies with building structures and those sorts of things. The inspector comes in on the Saturday morning of the festival, 4 hours before doors, checks the stages, the structures, the toilets. Is there enough free water? Is there enough fire extinguishers? Those sorts of things.
So Richie, we've only got 2 minutes left. Where do you see festivals in the next 10 years?
Oh, look, I just think whether it's electronic music or rock, I just think in general festivals are here to stay. It's a day out. Kids love, young people love to go. It's good value. They pay one price. They get to see a lot of talent. Depending, some festivals are at seaside locations at summertime. It just depends on where they are and why they're there. But I think it's a part of music culture, has been for many years, like Glastonbury and these sorts of things. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere. It's going to be as popular as ever. That's my opinion.
Okay, we might ask for questions from the audience now. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask anyone on the panel? A question over there? Yeah.
Hi there, guys. Just from South Africa, listening to you guys talk, what's happening, Toronto? Proper Cape Town boy, hey? Very nice. No, just listening, I'm sure you know about the scene back home, that it's, listening to you guys talk about Australia, it's very, very similar in South Africa.
No, it's not. There isn't one there, bro.
Whoa.
Starting, there's a few oaks, like...
Be a little bit patriotic about your country, Wade.
No, in all honesty, bro, like, people like Sean Duvet, they get like 30,000 people for Avicii, which has just started.
Sure,
For Dead Mouse and stuff, but on a whole, it's not a scene, bro. It hasn't started yet.
It's not a scene.
But I'm absolutely shocked by it, because it should be.
What's your question?
It's funny, because I was actually going to ask you a question, but I don't know, well, it still applies. Anyway, the scene, it's not really what I wanted to ask about, just the South African radio system and why we've got quite a few big acts coming out of South Africa, becoming global. Don't argue with me, Wade. There are quite a few. There's a quota system on the radio that every third song has to be from a local artist. And it's, for some people it makes radio shit because a lot of shit music's getting played. But at the same time...
At least you have like 2 other songs that are alright. Honestly, the radio in Australia is embarrassing. The radio in South Africa is actually alright, but the scene is terrible.
No, the scene is terrible, and the club scene's gone, and it's all about alcohol.
But it's embarrassing because it's been going for like 10 years, man. It should have always grown, but for some reason...
We'll let the guy get to his question. We're going to go a couple minutes.
The question was, is there a quota system throughout the ranks? I mean, what I would like to see in South Africa being done better is, South Africans coming through the ranks, instead of spending all the money that we have for budgets on bringing Avicii and bringing so-and-so, I'd rather see a development within the country, to bring up those kids, and I'm one of them. I'm trying to get, whatever it is, it's just, so...
There is a quota system in the Australian radio as well too, of Australian content that needs to be played. They've got a quota that they have to fill, but, they fill it with maybe old classics, Oz rock from the 80s that was a hit because they had to support it back then. Or like Grant said, they play it at 2, 3 in the morning. So it is very, very difficult for an Australian to get a new record over on the commercial radio. Triple J, is a great supporter of Australian music, but it's a bit, it's like bit more indie rock focused.
90% of all music in France is French-based, and that's why there's so many big French artists that you don't know outside of France, and I think it's good.
Do we have any other questions?
It's not going to be as much of a question, but listening to Wade for such a long time, I feel I need to say something. South African who lives in Ibiza and talks about Australia, very special. For your question, Neil, about 10 years from now, anywhere in the world, in Australia or anywhere else, it's all about currency that's called being relevant, People will be relevant then, will be in the marketplace. The ones who won't be, will just be by the wayside. So that's our motto. Hopefully, if we're still relevant in 10 years' time, as I was 20 years ago, I'll still be talking to you here.
It's true. I think that's a fair comment, Jerome. But the other thing we haven't touched on, I guess, is there's the competition to festivals might be the independent band who takes on the world by themselves, be it like the Swedish House Mafia doing Milton Keys or any of those sort of things. We had Daft Punk come to Australia and sell out their own show. That's the only thing I think that may have an impact on the marketplace, or the only addition where someone says, we'll do it ourselves. That's the only thing I can see potentially in the next 10 years.
As underground music develops, those acts that are headlining acts aren't going to be the acts that kids want to see. You know what I mean? I think it's going to change, where the club scene will grow again, and there will be only a few acts left, and then it will change again. You know what I mean? So.
But I think that happened this year with Big Day Out. The notorious indie rock festival. It sold however many tickets, whatever, but usually it was like sold out quickly or whatever. And you got like a Stereosonic who was full electronic lineup, and I think that showed the direction that things are going in Australia, and it's good for all of us.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That's it. Fantastic. Thank you for the panel.